But with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is what is going on, the craziness with Louisville basketball. And if you listen to this show, as is often the case, I think I was kind of ahead of the curve on this Chris Mack stuff. It was about 2 weeks ago that Louisville lost to Pitt on the road, and at the time when they lost to Pitt, I first started bringing up the conversation of, is Chris Mack going to be able to survive this season? If you remember, at the time I mentioned that that the loss to Pitt was one of the worst losses statistically for Louisville in the past 2 decades. Pitt is abjectly terrible this year. Pitt is currently, as I record here, 7-12, 2-6 in the ACC. It went down as one of the worst losses for Louisville basketball in decades, the worst loss of the Chris Mack era. And at the time, 2 weeks ago, I said, look, I don't know if this guy is going to be able to survive this season. Well, fast forward 2 weeks, and what happened? Since I last recorded that segment, Louisville has gone 1-2. They lost by double figures at home to Notre Dame over the weekend. They lost by double figures on the road to Virginia on Monday night. And now we have a new report from our old buddy, Nick Coffey. Nick Coffey used to be a contributor to this show, a regular guest to this show. Well, Nick Coffey puts out a report on Tuesday afternoon that says this. Nick Coffey says U of L, University of Louisville, has called a joint meeting for tomorrow, that is Wednesday, at 4 p.m. for the Board of Trustees and the University of Louisville Athletic Association. The meeting will address, quote, pending litigation and personnel matters. Also, the Chris Mack Coaches Show scheduled for tonight, that is Tuesday as I record here, has been canceled. And so to be clear, as I record here on Tuesday night, nothing has officially happened yet other than Chris Mack's Coaches Show being canceled for Tuesday. But there is a meeting between the University of Louisville Board of Trustees, the University of Louisville Athletic Association, talking about personnel matters. And while nothing is official, it seems like for all intents and purposes, the Chris Mack era at Louisville is coming to an end. Disappointing if it's true. We will wait to see. But let's get into what went wrong, why it happened like this, and if Chris Mack is ultimately let go, whether it's by end of day Wednesday, first thing Thursday, by the next game scheduled, which is on Saturday against Louisville. Let's just talk about it from a 30,000-foot view of what went wrong and how it all happened. Because I do think that, well, again, and just to be abundantly clear for the last time, nothing is official yet, but sometimes you have to read the tea leaves and look into the future. And I do think a lot of you would probably sit back and say, well, wait a second now, Torres. I know Louisville, they haven't been in the national landscape the way that Gonzaga has or Duke has or UCLA has or this program has or whatever. But have they really been that bad under Chris Mack? And what I would say is, in defense of Chris Mack, they really haven't been terrible, okay? First year takes over a complete dumpster fire. Of course, the year before, Rick Pitino had been fired. Interim head coach David Padgett had taken over. And in year one, Chris Mack makes the NCAA tournament. Loses to Minnesota, ironically at the time was coached by Richard Pitino, Rick Pitino's son. So a little salt in the wound. But I thought for all intents and purposes, you couldn't really complain about that first season from Chris Mack. On top of that, year two, Chris Mack is the head coach. Chris Mack still has a lot of the players from the Rick Pitino era, but Louisville goes 24-7, 15-5, and finishes tied for second in the ACC. That, to date, is still the best record in the ACC that Louisville has had since joining the ACC. Better than anything that Rick Pitino did, better than anything that Chris Mack has done since. But unfortunately, his best year, the NCAA tournament, is canceled, and so Louisville does not have a chance to show the world how good they are. Last year was year 3, of course, the COVID year. Louisville, the first team out of the NCAA tournament, finishing 13-7. 2 separate COVID pauses. It feels like if they had been able to at least play most of their schedule, one more win gets them in, but that was just how it fell last year. And this year, as I said, 11-9 overall as I record here on Tuesday night, 5-5 in the ACC. Of course, if it was just the win-loss record, if it was just a couple bad weeks on the court, well, that'd be one thing. The problem for Chris Mack is there's a lot of other factors at play. First of all, we know that right now there is basically a zero-tolerance policy at Louisville for anything NCAA related. We know about what happened in the Rick Pitino era with Brian Bowen. We know that case is not resolved. But, of course, over the last, 6-8 months, we find out about the Dino Gaudio extortion case. And I'll try to be brief, but I'll try to re-explain what happened there. But essentially, Chris Mack decides, you know what, after last season, I got to shake up the coaching staff. I am going to fire my longtime mentor and friend, Dino Gaudio. Dino Gaudio then says, Coach Mack, you fire me. I got dirt on you as it pertains to the NCAA. And if you fire me, you better pay me every single dollar, or I will go to the administration and bring up the NCAA violations that were done under your watch. Chris Mack is recording the whole interview, and so Dino Gaudio gets charged with extortion for trying to extort Chris Mack. Of course, in the process, we find out that there were very, very minor NCAA rules violations, one of which I believe is not even an NCAA rules violation anymore. But I bring it up because for a school that could have zero tolerance with the NCAA, it wasn't a good look. But beyond that, again, if the Dino Gaudio stuff happened, but Louisville was 19-2 right now, or 19-1, or 17-3, it's a lot different than being 11-9 overall. And so where Chris Mack's problems come in are, first of all, there was the whole Dino Gaudio thing. It embarrassed the university. Chris Mack served a suspension as part of that to start this season. But here's the bigger issue. What's going on with Chris Mack right now kind of reminds me what we talked about with Dan Mullen at the University of Florida during football season. It's not just the win-loss record when it comes to Chris Mack, in the same way that it isn't just the win-loss record when it came to Dan Mullen. It wasn't just the fact that the program seems to be going in the wrong direction under Chris Mack the way it was under Dan Mullen in the fall. If you remember, when the real conversation about Dan Mullen being let go started, what was the issue? It wasn't that Florida was tanking. It wasn't that Florida couldn't turn things around. It wasn't the current state of Florida. What it was with Dan Mullen at the time was pretty straightforward. It was that if you brought him back, there was nothing to sell in terms of the future of the program. And if I'm Louisville, that's the concern with bringing Chris Mack back. It's not only that you're 11-9 in the worst ACC maybe in the history of our lifetimes, where Virginia isn't good, Syracuse isn't good, Notre Dame isn't good, North Carolina is 13-6 right now. The problem is, if you bring back Chris Mack, there is nothing to sell to make you feel like things are going to get better by the start of next season. I bring that up because just think about the Chris Mack era. First of all, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, but it is worth reintroducing for people who maybe didn't listen to that segment. But if you think about the Chris Mack era, first year has one of the top recruiting classes in the country. Sounds great on paper, just one problem. For the most part, that class has largely disappointed. I looked it up before I started recording. 6 players were in that class. 3 of them transferred, basically had no impact on the program at all. 1, David Johnson, left after a very good freshman year, a disappointing sophomore year. And 2 are still in the program and struggling within the program right now. You know their names. I don't mean to pick on them, but Samuel Williamson, Jalen Withers have not lived up to expectations. Jalen Withers has played better the last few games. Not saying it's all their fault, not blaming the players, not saying this or that. But when you bring in a class that at one point was ranked the number 1 recruiting class in the country, and essentially no player, maybe one, lives up to expectations and he bounces, that's not a good look. Here's the bigger problem, though. It's everything that's happened in the last year, and not even including the Dino Gaudio stuff, the extortion stuff, all that. Here's the issue. First of all, last year, you missed the NCAA tournament. What's the first thing you do? Well, we just talked about it. You fire Dino Gaudio, you fire Luke Murray, both move on. I don't know if Luke Murray was technically fired, but everybody knows he wasn't coming back. So you bring in a bunch of new coaches, you shake up the coaching staff, it doesn't work. More importantly, what was the sell last offseason after you missed the NCAA tournament? New coaching staff, and we're going to go clean up in the portal. We're going to get this fixed. We're going to get older players, more experienced players, players good enough to help us win now in the ACC. Well, you signed 2 or 3 guys, and really outside Noah Locke, none of them are difference makers. And you can't say that there weren't difference makers in the portal, because look across college basketball. James Akinjo at Baylor's awesome. Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky's awesome. Walker Kessler at Auburn's awesome. Alondes Williams, who nobody knew anything about, is a potential All-American at Wake Forest. So you can't say there just weren't guys in the portal. You just didn't get the right ones. And so when you look at Louisville, and this is where you have to be concerned if you're thinking about bringing Chris Mack back, it's that there's really nothing to sell in terms of the future. Again, to use a separate parallel, whether it was the Dan Mullen, there's nothing to build on. It's kind of the same with Coach O when Coach O got fired, right? Coach O shakes up his staff not once but twice. Coach O brings in a couple. And at a certain point, the only common denominator is Coach O, and that's kind of the situation with Chris Mack. And so for the 1,000th time, he hasn't been fired. Nothing is official yet, but things don't look good. And even if Chris Mack survives this week, I think the question is, assuming you miss the NCAA tournament this year, which it seems like for all intents and purposes that's going to happen, how do you sell towards the future, especially considering that this year it's not only that you're 11-9, it's the fact that you've lost some games that Louisville should never lose, okay? They lose to Western Kentucky at Western Kentucky. I know it's a true road game. I know Western Kentucky's probably a little bit better than people think they are, but as the Louisville basketball coach, you can never lose to Western Kentucky, especially because Western Kentucky comes to Rupp Arena and plays Kentucky the following week, and it's an absolute disaster. Kentucky destroys them. Kentucky destroys Western Kentucky, the same team that destroyed Louisville 2 or 3 days before. You lose to DePaul. You lose to Pitt, as I said. So it's just really, really, really bad. And so we will see what the future holds for Chris Mack. But if you cancel his coach's show and you have a meeting with the Board of Trustees and Athletic Association, it cannot be good. Now, in terms of what could happen and what does happen if the Board of Trustees and the Athletic Department decide to move forward and get rid of Chris Mack, there's two really, really, really interesting elements beyond what I've already discussed. First of all, Chris Mack is owed a $12 million buyout. And so for an athletic department that really, when you look at this athletic department, obviously, look, they're in the ACC, they make money, all that good stuff. But, you know, you're dealing with all sorts of different issues. Now you got to come up with $12 million to pay Chris Mack to not be your basketball coach. That's just going to be an interesting couple things. Now, what's especially interesting is, as I said, with the Dino Gaudio situation, it is clear that some sorts of NCAA rules were broken, but they appear to be minor, and now you have a separate situation with the NCAA from Chris Mack's watch. And so I would suspect that Louisville, if they do fire Chris Mack, they're going to try to do it without cause. They're going to try to do it with cause, They're going to try to say, well, you broke NCAA rules. We had to get rid of you. Here's the problem. We just saw last week with Kevin Ollie at my alma mater that if you use that excuse and you really don't have much to back it up, you're going to end up paying. I think the bigger issue, and this is something, I think most people that care about Louisville basketball know, but Louisville's kind of in a weird spot as a university right now. Louisville has an interim president and an interim athletic director. And because they have an interim president and an interim athletic director, I'm just going to ask the question. Who the heck is making the hire? And beyond that, what kind of real candidate? And Louisville's a good job. And this is not me crushing Louisville. It's a good job. You play in essentially an NBA arena. You play essentially in an NBA town without an NBA team, so you are the NBA team. There's a lot to sell if you're Louisville. The problem is, if you open this job right now, what kind of coach is going to take the job when they don't know who the athletic director is? They don't know who the school president is. They just ran off Chris Mack after 4 years. And oh, by the way, as I said a minute ago, it's not as though the initial investigation that led to Rick Pitino's firing is even resolved yet. Now, we should get a resolution on that in the coming weeks, months, whatever. But at the same time, if you're a good coach with a good job, are you going to go to Louisville where you don't know what's going on with the Rick Pitino investigation, the Brian Bowen investigation from 2017? You don't know what happened with Mack off the court and all that stuff. And like I said, most of the two rules that he allegedly broke were pretty minor, but you just don't know. And you don't know who you're going to be working for? So this is fascinating. It is incredible to look at from a distance. And I'm just sitting here saying, you talk about very, very, very interesting situations across the world of college sports. This one is right at the top. So I have no idea what Louisville's going to do. We will monitor this story going forward. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, Chris Mack, straight from Nick Coffey's Twitter feed to your ears. Louisville has called a joint meeting for Wednesday at 4 p.m. with the Board of Trustees and the U of L Athletic Association. The meeting will address pending litigation and personnel matters. Chris Mack's radio show, Chris Mack's coach's show, was canceled on